everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to our webinar. I am so excited to be here today. We've been looking forward to this release for a long time, so I'm really excited to be able to show you Visual BACnet Site Manager. Without further ado, I want to introduce Tom Walker. Hi, Tom. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, everybody.
So, Tom, actually, Tom, I don't even know your title, but Tom's a big deal.
System design specialist, but it really doesn't mean anything because it doesn't line up with what I do. So
fair enough. So Tom is here from Penn State University, and we've been working with them a lot on the development of this release, and they've been our biggest beta customer here. So I wanted to bring Tom here so that everyone can get a feel for exactly how they're using it. I can tell you all day how I think you should use it, but it's far more useful to have Tom talking about how they're using it and some of the benefits that they've seen. So we are going to very quickly dive into the actual interface and what it looks like and how you can use it and some of the features. But before we do that, I just wanted to get an idea from you, Tom. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're using this site manager and why it's so important to you?
We started down the path, what, 2.5 years ago, I think at this point. Just been quite a while. We met out at Realcomm. We really liked the product, but we saw it could be so much more. We were looking for the active monitoring, being able to constantly get results back of what is happening on the infrastructure, because there's so many times that you spend hours troubleshooting or trying to find out what is affecting the whole network as a big enterprise level, and pinpointing those exact areas is hard sometimes, especially if you're just looking at Wireshark captures or regular IT type network capture tools. So when we started down the path, we talked with you guys, looked through kind of what we were looking for, and then kind of build out that scope. And here we are. It took a little bit of while to build it and get it to where it was working the way we wanted, but so far, I mean, it's phenomenal. The change in way we can target and focus our efforts, it makes it much easier.
Great. So just to give a little bit of context to all of this, I wanted to show you guys, I'll start showing my screen again. This is what the old version of site monitoring looked like. So actually, this is an inactive site, so it's not acting as happy as I would like it to. But, oh, there goes everything. Okay, here we go. So probably right before you got this release, Tom, you guys had multiple, I don't know, I would say 20, 30, 40, 50, I can't remember how many, different capture locations, right? So different places on campus where you were looking at the network and capturing that information, and each one looked like this.
Yes.
And so the big thing that we wanted to sort of, the whole reason that site monitoring, site manager here exists is to be able to take all of those 50 plus different capture locations and pull it together into this overall site and give it some structure. And so I'm going to show you exactly how that works. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how, when you first log into Visual BACnet, exactly how that looks, and then we'll jump into Penn State's and we'll take a look at it in a few minutes as well. So to start with, you'll notice, for those of you that are users or are customers, it used to say My Files on the left-hand side. Now it says Troubleshooting and Monitoring. If you're not aware, those are our two different types of accounts. So you can have a troubleshooting account. That is for the person, and this looks like our old My Files screen. That is if you want to upload individual files and analyze each one individually. Likely you work on a lot of different sites. You're an integrator, a technician, and so you're trying to fix different places all over your area, and so you'll upload individual files. That's still the same, but now we have this lovely monitoring interface. And you'll notice when I put my mouse over these, a little star comes up. So you can actually star whichever one you use more often. This is particularly if you use monitoring more often. So when you log in, whichever one you've starred will be your home screen. So if you're coming into monitoring every single day or every time you log in, you want to star monitoring and it'll show up there. Once you're in monitoring, you'll see it's very empty right now. So I'm gonna build for you a quick example of how you might build out your site. So I'm gonna call it main site because I am very creative. And my main site is gonna be a campus. So you have the option here to choose organization, campus, BMS, or building. And this allows you to really be creative about how you lay out your site and customize it based on the actual physical or logical layout of your site. So we're going to create that main site. And then if I click on it, you'll start getting the information. You'll get our interface about it. And now I can add, say, building 1. Say that I want building 1 under my main site. So it's building. And you'll start to be able to see a bit of a structure here. That can go on as long as you like. You can have buildings or areas or BMSs nested within each other, however you would like to lay it out. And then from there, you can add your monitoring node. And that's the one that's going to actually receive the PCAP file, receive the data. So only monitoring nodes are able to receive data. And then that information will aggregate up into the area above it. So you may notice, might take a second here. I'm getting my little onboarding thing. You may notice here that this screen actually has all of the same information as this screen back here did. It's just a different visual. So we used to have the site health graph. We used to have all the files, some information about the network health of the latest file. In here, you can see when there's a file in there, you'll see the network health of the latest file. You'll see the site graph, and all the files will be listed here. We'll show you that more in Penn State that actually has data. You also are able to get the API key. So for those of you who are familiar with the API key for the capture tools, that's available in here. The alerts, exactly the same as in the current version of Visual BACnet. You can get an alert when a network health changes. So if it goes below 50 or changes up or down by more than 10, that will trigger an email alert to you. And you can change that, configure it specifically to your site. So all of that is the same for those of you who are familiar. We also have kind of a fun new thing. So you may or may not be aware that in an actual Visual BACnet file, so once you're digging in and troubleshooting a file, sometimes you come across, a great example is a global whois. You may have a device that is programmed by the factory to do a global whois every 2 minutes. That's not ideal. Anything you can do to avoid it is highly recommended. But occasionally we have someone who says, that's just how it is and we're not worried about it. And so you can actually turn that diagnostic check off. So it used to be that you could turn that diagnostic check off for an individual file. Now you can turn it off for this whole monitoring node. So every file that comes in with that issue, it will ignore that issue. So let me find global whois. Here it is. So I can turn it off. And if you do that, make sure you hit Save Changes. It also shows you what the thresholds are. So this was also available within the file. Now it's available in the monitoring node. You can't change them, but they're there for you to be able to see them so you know what you're aiming for. A nice thing also for those of you who are our current customers and may have gotten into an issue where you want to change the name of a site that you've already opened, you can actually go in here and change the name of it. So you cannot change the type. You can't change that this is a monitoring node because that's a very different type of node, but you can change this other information. Another thing that you're able to do, and I don't have many things in here, so maybe we'll just quickly add another building. this monitoring node had accidentally ended up in building 1, but I wanted it to be in building 2, no problem. Do a quick drag and drop, confirm that I want it in there, and we can move it. So it's pretty easy to drag and drop and change that layout. Okay, you may have noticed I kind of skipped around this little share button. This is a very exciting new feature. We now have the ability to share at any level within this site. So for example, if you had a specific vendor that's working on building 2 and only building 2, you could share building 2 with that vendor, and they will be able to see everything underneath that area. So in this case, if I share building 2, they'll see the building 2 aggregate screen as well as the monitoring node underneath it. And if there were 10 monitoring nodes underneath it, they would see those. So it allows you to have different people who are working on different portions of the building. For example, maybe you have a BMS that's one vendor and a BMS that's a different vendor. You could share just that BMS information with those vendors. You can also share all of the information with your coworkers or someone else on your site. When you do that share, I share it with myself, you'll notice a little pop-up here. It automatically shares in view only. So view only means that the user can go in, they can look at the data, they can run advanced reports, they can diagnose any issues, but they can't move around nodes, they can't open new nodes, they are not able to share anymore, they can just look at the information. So that's also a feature that we've added. So you could, for example, if you wanted to share your BMSs separately, you could share them in view-only mode. But your colleagues, you might share it in admin mode, full access mode. Okay, so I think that is most of the features that I wanted to quickly throw at you. If there are questions, feel free to ask them, and I will take a look at those. And I want to jump in now to Penn State. So now that we know a lot of the things that are it's possible to do, I want to look at, we'll look at Penn State and see exactly how they're using it and put some of these features into context. So if it will load for me, there we go. All right, I don't see any questions. So if you do have questions, please let me know. All right, so what we're seeing here, I'll open up the tree of Penn State. So Tom, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you have, how the layout of your site, how Penn State is laid out and how that sort of helped with your structure here?
Yeah, so at University Park, we have grouped areas of responsibility, and so that's why you see Area 1, Area 2. There are different buildings are in different areas. Some areas overlap depending on critical nature. Area 6 is our kind of all lab critical, our data center, those kind of locations. And then housing is separate from E&G. So we broke everything down that same way, so that way we could actually look at an area and understand, all right, are we having a problem on this side of the campus, this side of the campus, and base it off of those area locations.
Okay, and so under each of those areas, you have a varying number of capture nodes. So Area 2 doesn't have as many, Area 1 has a lot. And so those capture nodes, where are they? Are they each in a building, or are they a subsection of a building? Can you talk us through that a little bit?
It depends. For the most part, there's a one per building. We're using the IP based device for just capturing up at the switch level. Because of some issues with ALC, people that use ALC will understand what I'm talking about. There's not an easy way to capture that ARCnet traffic. So in buildings that we do have MSTP, we could have an IP device and MSTP devices underneath it. If you go under Commonwealth branch campuses, there's a Abington campus, and then underneath there, is a breakdown of a building, Abington. It should be at the top there.
Yeah, there we go.
Abington, and then that's Lionsgate building within there. And there you can see we have one IP device and then a device on each of the MSTP networks. It's a ALC over Johnson TEC units facility. So to get a better picture of what was going on there, these actually just got deployed last week. And as you can see, 40 on one of the networks there, that is a major issue. There's a lot of things that are going on in there that the refresh rate of the MSTP trunk, the token pass is just, it's taking 200 milliseconds on some, and I think one of them was up over 400 milliseconds. So there's a lot of issues going on in those individual networks, and now we have a better picture of what is happening there. So now we can start troubleshooting and say, all right, hey, we need to move some of these devices off or change some wiring or whatever we need to do there.
Great. And yeah, the 40 and 50 mismatch is an issue that it has been fixed for the release next week, so not to worry about that, or this week. Yeah, this is actually a great example because you can look at all of your different MSTP networks and go, oh, this is clearly the one that we need to focus on. This is the one with the most issues.
Yep.
And so all of these 7 different nodes, monitoring nodes, are averaging to create this 69 score. So for those of you who are a little bit confused about how that works, we take all of the nodes underneath it and we look at what's the minimum, the maximum, and the average of those nodes. So you can get a feel here for what your spread is looking like. This is, I would say, Tom, you're doing fairly well to have only one that's red, and it's 40, not 4. So I know you have high standards, and that's great, and we encourage that. But for some people, this would look pretty nice.
Yep.
So I'm just going to jump back into your main Penn State one here. So, oh, actually, I'll show on the branch campus here. For the overall health score, so all of those areas that you might put above any of your monitoring nodes, they will average the monitoring nodes underneath them. So in the Abington, you know, in the, which one was it?
Yeah, that one.
Oh yeah, this one. So this Lionsgate is averaging all of these monitoring nodes below it, as is this campus. And then the branch campus is looking at, the Commonwealth branch campus overall organization is looking at all of the monitoring nodes that are underneath it and averaging those.
And you can see when we brought online that particular building.
Wah, 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 wah. Yeah, but it's a great visual.
Yep.
And similarly, on the Penn State one, on your overall one, you can get a really good feel for a lot of the work that you guys have been doing, because you can see a definite increase in that minimum. So your minimum is actually out of the red now, which is amazing. Great work on that. However, I have a sneaking suspicion that it's going to be a continual, as you add a new one, it's going to drop again, just as that last one did, and then you'll improve it, and then you'll add more, and then it's kind of going to be a continual process of getting that score up, and then also keeping it up as you add new buildings and add all kinds of different campus projects. So you have that to look forward to.
Yep. Which we were having the problems before, we just had no insight to it.
Right, yeah, it's not new issues, it's just new insight. And so your team, Tom, who is looking at this overall network health score, and who is looking at the deeper dives, and how do you use those different network health scores?
The main network health overall score came about from our department's work towards creating KPIs for evaluation time, and just to kind of give people a better sense of what we do and what we're trying to drive towards. We needed to have some kind of metric, and being IT/BAS, there really weren't easy metrics for me to come up with. Do I do it by we've built out or redone this many networks or cleaned up these many networks. How you quantify that and put that into your overall evaluations and all those kind of things.
Right.
One of our previous scores that we based everything on was broadcast traffic. We said we wanted to make sure that we were under 20,000 packets per hour of broadcast traffic. And we've done pretty good at that over the last several years, but it wasn't a true metric of the overall health of the system, whereas this gives us that capability to roll everything up and say, at an enterprise level, we are this score, and we're trying to drive to maintain that score. Right now, I'm playing with the number. I think 70 is probably where we're going to land at, and say we want to be better than 70% average across the whole enterprise and be able to maintain that.
Yeah, and I think that's quite standard, I would say. We give 80 as a pass, but it's not realistic to aim for 100. That would take so much effort to get that extra 20 or 30%, and it's not worth your time. You guys have so many other things to do. So I think 70, based on all the hard work that you've done to increase your score, I think that if you guys achieve that after rolling all these different capture points out across your campus, that would be really amazing.
Yep.
And so another thing that I had showed previously was this share function. And so I'm just wondering if you can maybe speak a little bit to how you're planning on using that view only versus full access sharing throughout your campus here.
For the most part, our group, the 50 plus employees under FAS, they probably will all have the full access to the system. There may be a few the operators who don't necessarily need to dig into the back end part of it, but everybody else will be read. And so we're looking at giving our facility coordinators access to this and be able to say, hey, these are your networks that are within your area, and you should be doing something about it. Send your guys out to look at the network. Why is all of a sudden this network so much less than it was yesterday? And have them help us try to maintain these, because we get these one-off construction jobs that they're doing a VAV in one room, and so they didn't do a full project around that. They just went in, added the VAV, and did what they did, and maybe not changed out sensors and some other things, and all of a sudden we're getting a ton of noise from that particular device. Being able to have that data and be able to say, hey, look, you guys did something exactly at this time frame. What did you do? Or who was working in the building in that time frame? We need to know what they did so we can undo it or put it right so that there's not an issue.
And in that scenario, would you have them looking at it on a regular basis, or would you have the alerts for their area going to them? How would you expect them to use it? Or would you have your team go, hey, go log in today because I see something new?
It might be a little combination of everything. For the most part, we probably will just send reports to them weekly, just say, hey, we noticed, this is the report for this week, and if we don't see any response from them or don't see an improvement, try to reach out to them and say, hey, can you guys take a look at this and see what's going on? I do have the advantage that I have 2 network analysts that do nothing but look at this 24/7. They're looking at Wireshark, they're looking at all the different capture tools stuff that we got going on and analyzing and what's going on. So have a little better advantage than most groups. Most groups that you see, they may have one guy that's doing something like this, but having this tool in front of that one guy is probably even more valuable for that type of situation than it is for us, because they don't have those people constantly watching it. So being able to go in there quickly and see something going on, or setting up an alert or trigger, really could be beneficial for the smaller shop and smaller groups that are maintaining, the same size infrastructure as we are.
Okay, so I think that makes a lot of sense. And really, these are all things that are going to be different on a university to university or campus to campus basis. But it's great to hear you share yours, because then it kind of makes people think about different ways they could potentially use Visual BACnet and improve their networks, even if they don't have two awesome network analysts working for them full time. So we got a question here, and before I jump into those, one thing I will show is that if we go back into that Abington capture area here, what I didn't show, and for those of you who may not be as familiar with Visual BACnet or just figuring it out, once you go, okay, this is the 40% node, this is the one we need to look at, you scroll down here, you'll see all of the capture files. So you'll see 40, 50, 40, 40, 30, 50. So you'll see sort of that history of what it's done, which is reflected in the graph. And you can click into the latest one, and that's where you're going to get, this is the file screen that probably most of you are fairly familiar with if you're a user. For those of you who aren't, this is where the actual troubleshooting happens. So most of what we looked at so far is where Tom and his team are going, okay, where should we focus our time? Where are the issues? And then once that resource is sort of dedicated to fixing this 40%, they'll take a look in here and go, okay, well, what's going on? Would you agree with that, Tom?
Yes.
So you never really look into this screen, hopefully.
I rarely do. If the guys have a question or if there's a deeper issue, then I'll get dragged in to look at it. But for the most part, I'm just looking at the main page and trying to figure out, where there's issues and where can I focus our technicians for the day.
Okay, perfect. And so when your technician is looking at it, they're going to go, and just a quick little, for those of you who aren't as familiar, this is all of our diagnostic checks. We have 30 different diagnostic checks. 3 of those are MSTP specific, so the last one here and the last 2 here. And our diagnostic checks are in order of criticality. So we say start at the top and work your way down. For example, if you have unresponsive routers, there's no point trying to fix your unresponsive devices until you fix those unresponsive routers, because likely once the routers come online, those devices will be back online. And from there, you can click on into any of them. So let's say you do want to look at those unresponsive devices. We can click into here, and it will show you a list of those unresponsive devices. Here we go. So these are the 6 devices that are not responding 100% of the time. So that's 100% means it's fully unresponsive. And then you can look at who is trying to talk to that device. And then it's up to you to sort of apply some of your knowledge of the site and say, okay, device 0 shouldn't be talking to 979.419. That device doesn't actually exist. It's an old one, not a device that was taken off the network, and therefore it's not responding because it shouldn't be on there. So we need to look at the device querying it, or 97419 should be on the network and it should be responding, so we need to figure out why it's not responding. So that's a quick run through of what you would do with the information once you saw that 40 and wanted to fix it. But we had a question for you, Tom, that was asking, so when a network health score becomes poor, like in this 40 example, how actionable is the data? So do you guys immediately know what to do, or what's your process there?
That'd be more of a Kevin or Ed question. Yeah. But we go in and start looking at, like you said, we start with the checks. We go down through the checks, look at those. And we've even done some analysis offline, like we'll then take the capture file and download it, open up Wireshark and take a deeper dive. That's just how we work. We're Wireshark fiends. So, but we use the basic diagnostic checks to kind of guide us, and we go down through, and all of a sudden we see the MSTP refresh rate is 200. That's 200 milliseconds on a MSTP trunk. There's no sense in us really troubleshooting it. There's physical wiring problems, or there's too many devices chatting on that network for it to operate properly.
Right.
So there's a mechanical element to that we kind of have to analyze and say, yeah, we're going to have to go do a capture, and I'm actually scheduling to go out to that site this next coming week so that I can do a deeper dive and take a look at the wiring, look at cabinets. One of the comments was the diag was full bars all the way up to the top was not a good sign in ALC's world. So.
Right. Yeah, I would say based on what we've heard from a lot of customers, one of the biggest things, one of the most challenging scenarios to troubleshoot is bad wiring, because inevitably you're not getting all the data and you're not getting all the communications. And so it makes it very hard to, bad configurations we can usually figure out. Bad wiring is a tougher one to deal with and a tougher one to fix as well, because you just have to go and yank on wires.
Yeah, and that's, you can actually see if you go back to the Lionsgate tree, there's one that you can see that
Sorry.
Nope.
Here we go.
So click on one of those two that are 90.
Okay.
Now, even though they have a 90 score, when you look down into it and dig into it, if you open up one of the capture files, the issue is it's a malformed packet. So it's receiving 100% of the traffic, but the checksum errors is at 100%. So 100% of the packets it's receiving, it is not able to understand.
Huh. Okay. So sometimes, it's funny you say that, because we always joke that if you get 100% packet, 100% PCAP file, something's wrong.
Yep.
Because it's basically impossible. So this is 90, not 100, but similar scenario where it's basically impossible to achieve that without something being wrong, either in how you've captured the data or something like this, where.
Well, it even says 0 BACnet traffic, and we know there's at least 20 devices on each network, so there's a problem.
7 million packets in this file, so something's wrong.
Yep, so we're going to try to go out and take a look at it and see what's going on.
Okay. So someone else asked, how long does your team, or how often do you and your team look at your score? So either the overall score or a score of the specific areas.
I'm checking the scores usually once a day.
Okay.
But the guys there, they have it open all day, so they're constantly in there looking at it.
Okay. Perfect. And then another question, how long have you guys been using it? So I think we said at the beginning, 2 years was our guess?
Yeah, we started developing it and everything together about 2 years ago, and we went right to beta. We've been beta ever since.
Yeah, one day you'll get out of beta.
Yeah, so we've been in there, and we've had resounding success with this. This helped me prove in at least 5 different cases of issues on different networks that people told me, oh, no, those networks are fine. I was able to come back, show them the report, and say, yeah, no, not so much. They had one at our Navy yard. They were sampling 4,000 devices every second and wondered why the building wasn't functioning. As soon as we turned off the OSI soft Pi and looked at the capture, then it dropped almost, it was like 70% of the traffic on the network. And then all of a sudden the building stabilized.
Right, of course. Okay, so I mean, so the second half of the question after how long have you been using it was, have you been able to show improvement? So clearly that's a big one, is being able to. So when you say that, are you typically going to a vendor to say, no, there is a problem, there is a network problem, or who are you proving that to?
It varies. It's been across the board, but most of the time it is a specific vendor. In the Navy Yard case, I was actually pitching it to the professors that said, "Oh, we need to sample it at this rate," and I basically told them, at this sampling rate, the data you're getting is worthless because the system can't function at that rate. And once they backed it off, we were able to see an improvement in the building, and they've done a lot of rewiring and a bunch of different things to make that building, and the building now functions, and they can still get not as tight as they wanted, but at least fairly tight data incoming into their system.
Right. Okay. One of the joys of being in university, you get to deal with all these projects and fun things that professors want to do.
Yep.
So another question here, do you use the scores to prioritize workload? And maybe how do you do that?
Yes, yeah, we will look at the scores, find the lowest scores, and then focus our attention to that area for that day. We do have a couple other tools that we're using that give us some other insights and kind of help guide us also at the same time. But we also get the trouble calls. Somebody calls, says, hey, this building is having all kinds of issues. If we don't have the capture tool in there, then Kevin and Ed will work with my CCS techs. They'll go out, deploy the capture tools in those buildings, and maybe even do a manual packet capture while they're there. So while we're waiting for the packet capture to upload to the system, we can upload our capture file and begin the troubleshooting before the full processing has happened.
Okay. Very cool. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. There was a couple other things I wanted to make sure. Oh, I got too excited there. That's really great. That's super helpful for me, Tom. Just from a feature perspective, I wanted to make sure I clicked really quickly into the sites shared with me. You will notice that there's my sites and sites shared with me. So when you log in, you will automatically go to my sites. But if someone has shared a site with you, you can click there and see it there. And if you don't have anything in my sites, you will start automatically going there. So you don't have to be clicking around all the time when you first log in. But if someone shares a site with you, it will show up in your email. You'll get an email that the site has been shared with you. And on that note, if you are sharing a site and the person has an account, they'll get an email and it will show up in their account. And if they don't have an account, they'll get an email and they can open an account. So there's all kinds of sharing functions there, but it will always show up in this site shared with me area. I don't have too much else. If people have any more questions, so if you have any more questions, let us know. Feel free to ask them. Tom, any last words on how you guys are using Visual BACnet, or your big plans, or how you benefited from it?
There's still some changes and stuff we're looking at to implement with you guys, but overall the product now where it stands is very close to exactly what we envisioned originally. Just being able to quickly get to the problem areas, even just like there on the screen, it changed, showing the up and down trends beside the scores is very quick and beneficial to know that there's something happening in that particular area if you weren't drilled down in on any specific area. Us being able to take something that was just a file based and having to manually upload, and now to have the capture tool and being able to automate it, and then this finally brings that all together so that we're not having to sift through multiple locations to try to find the device or the tools and nodes. And the search function works really well to quickly filter and get, if somebody says, hey, do you know what's going on over at Abington, we could quickly type that in and it's going to take us right to where we need to go, whether that's a building here or a building out at the Commonwealth side. And what we've done is as we've expanded our network out to the Commonwealth, we're adding these capture tools as part of our package so that we're giving them the best kind of support that we can, that we're, showing them the benefit to having the real-time monitoring, being able to show them any issues that are going on their networks. It's helped us a lot in helping them find even funding for a project to go fix the issues. One of the biggest issues at the Abington Lionsgate is it's a integration between ALC and Johnson TEC units. And because of that integration, nobody thought to add window switches. So if more than 5 students open up their windows, it can actually cause the building to go into collapse. And then it takes 3 days for the building to come back to temperature. And we've had experienced that at least 3 times since that building came online about 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, so and here we can see the main reasons is that there's communication problems on the inside of the building, and because you're heavily integrated, that's even worse matchup there. Is if you're doing a lot of integration, you're relying on those TEC units to give us the cooling requests. That's if it can't communicate that, then the primary equipment's not going to perform to what you need to maintain the building.
Yeah. Okay, so we had a flurry of last minute questions here. So speaking, you were mentioning benefits and costs and all these things. So Robert wants to know, does the benefit outweigh the cost?
Yes. When you think about what all of us seen it, the construction projects come in, they put it all together. It's just having this insight is invaluable. And that actually brings up another use case, the construction jobs. Every time we have construction here, something happens, we start seeing network go down, what's going on. Now we can put this in while the building's being built, and as they're cleaning up the building. One of our goals is actually to set it up that this health score has to be above a certain number for us to pass off on the actual HVAC system. That you have to have a clean score of whatever that we decide that to be. We've even looked at that on the alarming side, saying that you must be under a certain amount of alarms per a 24-hour period before we're going to accept the building on the BAS side. So having this ahead of time before we go to accept has been very invaluable there. It's really not, in the big scheme of things, this is maybe, I'd say maybe less than 1/10 of what our overall budget is. I mean, it's, and again, it just being able to, instead of me having to send a tech out there every single day because there's more problems, I can quickly get the analyst looking at it, say, oh yeah, it's just this device, it's not reporting in or whatever. And maybe we can manually reset that from here versus sending a technician out there. He's going to get out there, have to do a packet capture, bring the packet capture back to my guys, and then go back out and actually fix the problem once they figure out what the problem is.
And let's hope that that problem's not happening at 2 a.m.
And that too.
Okay, so you kind of answered Brian's question here, which was, do you require vendors to check the network health before and after a job? But he also added to that, do you have a spec that you use for that?
No, not really. We have our Division 25 spec that we're currently revamping, going through, trying to get rid of a lot of duplicate stuff. It's been so organic over the years that there's duplicate sections that don't match up and different requirements. Like one of our requirements is for mini switches. If we need a mini switch in a location for tech access, but that doesn't mean plug all the rest of the panels on that same wall into that mini switch. Right. We want to eliminate single points of failure as much as possible. But yeah, it's just the specification, we're slowly getting it to where we want. I haven't introduced this yet, but I think it's definitely something that we should, so that we know we're getting something clean turned over to us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, we had probably 4 or 5 questions about that, sort of holding vendors to account with a network health score. So what I will add to that, just because I've had the benefit of reading through all those questions, is that it really seems like you guys are monitoring the network health score and then saying, as in the contract, you can't leave until it's 80% or 70% or whatever it is you decide that threshold is. But it's really you, and I've seen this in other places as well, you're the ones who are getting the file or looking at it and saying no or yes.
Yes. Yeah, and actually before it, and it's still in our specification, was network captures. We actually required PCAP files from the vendors.
Right.
Was part of it, but the problem was after a period of time, nobody was looking at the PCAP files, and then it just kind of, they just stopped turning them in, just like as-builts, nobody was really harping on them to get the as-bills up to date, and here we are 2 years later for a building and still haven't had the as-bills for it.
Yeah, and another thing that I've seen happen on other campuses is they'll turn in that 20-minute capture, which is great in those 20 minutes, and then there's a problem 5 hours later. Or so, as you were saying with that alarms, the 24 hours of no alarms or few alarms.
Yep.
Saying that with network as well, it's not just do you have 20 minutes of good network data, but is it consistently staying good?
Well, something interesting with Siemens, they actually filtered their file, and I was able to prove it with your tool that they had filtered it, because there was BACnet traffic that they should have been seeing and it wasn't there. And so we were able to analyze it with the tool and show them, hey, you guys gave us a filtered PCAP file. That's not what we asked for.
Yeah, and that's one of the benefits of being able to automatically capture it, whether it's from our hardware capture tools or software on the BMS, being able to automatically have it going into the system, which just saves everyone's time of manually capturing it and make sure that you are getting consistently good data. Give us a call if you have any questions, and this will be launching onto our app, visualbacnet.com tomorrow, likely late in the day. We will do our best not to interrupt any usage. So keep an eye on that, and we're looking forward to getting your feedback. Please tell us what you think. Let us know what you would like to see, or if you find any bugs or anything, definitely let us know. Thanks so much for spending the time with us today. And Tom, thank you so much for sharing all of your insight and your knowledge and how you use Visual BACnet. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Thanks. Bye.